Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is a prep coach and the owner of Aftermath Training. Today's guest is Alexx Baugh. Alexx, welcome to the podcast.
My man, how are you?
I'm doing great, Alexx. Looking forward to getting to know you a little bit more, man, and chopping up with you, having a great conversation. Before we kind of take a deep dive into things, I want to ask you, who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time?
Man, so I'm a fan of the podcast, so I know you asked this question. So I have two answers. One would be like when I was really deep into bodybuilding and first getting started, who I looked up to. Um, and most people think, like the Jay Cutlers or the Kai Greens, but I look to more the people that I thought was more attainable. And so I looked more towards like, which is crazy saying attainable, but like Evan Senapani or Antoine Vaillant. Training wise, it was always like a Branch Warren, and even Frank McGrath. I love those guys. But I would say the one thing that the one guy that stood out to me when I really started to prep was Jose Raymond. And I know we're built nothing alike, but that picture of him, man, when he's at that expo and he pulls his shorts down and you see the quad veins, I was like that was like what I just envisioned. So I would say Jose, and then as I progressed, Dallas, even after Dallas passed, Dallas, I still would watch, even my recent prep in 2021, I would watch him daily, and even though I'd seen the videos, he was probably one of the most influential, I'd say, towards him.
Awesome, man. Love it. That's a good crew right there. So Alexx, why don't you tell us at what age you started lifting weights, and then why did you start lifting weights at that specific age?
So growing up, I was kind of the fat kid up until about 15. And that was when I first joined a gym. But I had gotten into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and boxing at like 11 and 12 because my dad. And so I remember I was getting ready for like my first jiu-jitsu tournament at 14, 15, and I was like 205 pounds. And I was like, oh God, I would fight Rampage Jackson. That was literally in my head. I was like, well, I'm not a light heavyweight. And so I had this first match that summer. It was like my freshman year of high school. And I just went on this huge diet of like no carbs, all the cardio. And I got down to like 154 pounds. And that was like, it was like over a course of 3 months. And then right after that, all my friends were on the football team were jacked, but I was like, handcuffing myself to the treadmill trying to get skinny. And then so I'd say about 15 was when I really started picking up the weights and trying to get big.
All right. So why don't you talk to us a little bit more, Alexx, then about your childhood and your upbringing? So, where did you grow up? Any siblings? Did you play sports? Paint the picture for us a little bit about what Alexx was like when he was a youngster.
Yeah, man. So I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. It's a it's a nice little town. A lot of people don't think we have roads and stuff here in Alabama, but we're kind of like a small Nashville here in Birmingham. But I was one of those kids, man. Like I grew up kind of poor. The reason I lived in a nice suburban neighborhood growing up, but it was either because my stepdad's family at the time, and then when my mom and him divorced, ended up being like my mom's parents would like pay our rent places. And so I didn't really fit in with the kids financially, but I was blessed to have family around to help. But that was something that, so coming up was kind of rough. Like I had a dad who was a drug addict, stepdad was a drug addict, single mom, with three kids, so I have an older brother and a younger sister. And so that was like, it wasn't easy, but at the same time, like I wouldn't change anything about growing up. Me and my brother really bonded because he was 4 years older than me, and he was like my father figure. So anything he did, I would do. And so, um, and since we're touching on that, like me and my dad we're cool. Like we're like he's like a cool uncle. He loves what I do, sports what I do. He was even growing up, he was at all of my games. He coached all my teams. So I played basketball, played football, played baseball. Like I said, he had his own boxing gym. So like he was there. It's just for he was just there, like he was just like a really good coach, and that was just how we bonded. But yeah, growing up, basketball, I was really good at basketball, but I was kind of fat, so I couldn't really run the floor. And then later, like my teenage years, I'd gotten kind of away from basketball and more into the Brazilian jiu-jitsu and MMA stuff. I did that from about 14 to 18. um and so that was kind of my upbringing. Like I said, it was a lot of, yeah, I played travel ball. I played, so I played basketball like year round. And that was something. I remember I got cut from like the seventh grade team, and that was when I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna go box. And then I just kind of always wanted to be doing something.
Okay, now something I want to touch on is, you said that you were the fat kid up until you were about 15, right? Now,
Yeah.
so talk a little bit about what that was like for you. I mean, did you get made fun of? Was it something that you knew that you were fat, and did you have like were you kind of self-conscious in terms of your body image and stuff when you were younger, or not so
Man,
much maybe until your teenage years?
Man, yeah. So like it was weird. Like I was very popular. Like I have a lot of friends in school. Like I never really got picked on for it from kids my age. It was usually like older kids from time to time. Um, but it wasn't everything. Like I never really got bullied. But it was just like I was just kind of the funny fat kid. But then like, eighth grade comes around, ninth grade comes around, and you got school dances, and like, girls are starting to like boys, and you start to being like, man, like, well, this kind of stuff, like, but my mom, and she'd always, oh, you'll grow out of it, you'll grow out of it. And then you get to be 15, you're like, all right, dude, well, it's not really growing out of it. So yeah, but no, it's like I said, it definitely, growing up like 10, 11, like I remember playing basketball, like you could do shirts and skins, and I would always be, I'm just, hey, coach, it's cool if I wear a tank top. And they're like, yeah, sure, but they knew, but it was one of those, like, it definitely fueled me now. And I remember it's definitely affected me more than I thought, because I remember being backstage, I was competing, and the tan girls like lotioning me up, and I was like, dude, I just feel like you're just like rubbing like pounds of fat right now. I was like, is that weird? And she's like, yeah. And she's like, that's a problem. Yeah, it definitely played a role in what I'm doing now,
Mhm.
for sure.
Okay. All right. Now, something else I want to talk about is you kind of went on this weight loss journey. Around 15, you said. So you lost a significant amount of weight. What did that do for you? Because usually, if somebody can do that on their own, it's like a confidence booster, and it kind of like moves them forward significantly in terms of just life, and again, confidence and things like that. So what did that do for you, Alexx, being able to lose all that weight on your own?
Man, it definitely, I think confidence was the big thing, because it was the summer of my freshman year going to my sophomore year. And I remember going back to school that sophomore year, and like people were like, whoa, like you look good, what are you doing? And that was the first time I actually felt like confident about it. And definitely I had no idea what I was doing. Like I just remember like carbs were bad, protein's good, and I would just, it wasn't healthy at all. Like I remember like I would go out and eat after, like my friend's parents took us to eat pizza one time after a basketball game. I remember running like miles when I got done. So I was able to learn the right way to do it eventually, but then it was just like I remember my friends calling me trying to like hang out, and I'm like, no, dude, I'm tired. And I think like the only carbs I would eat would be like Special K cereal. It'd be like one bowl a day, and the rest was like chicken breast and egg whites, you know.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. So the last thing I want to touch on, kind of like, in your high school years, teenage years, is the boxing and the BJJ. So you said that your dad owned a boxing gym, so that kind of exposed you to those sports at a young age. But did you enjoy those sports, and just talk a little bit about getting exposed to that and involving yourself in it as a teenager?
I did, man. I loved it. So, like, growing up, I was a fan of like the WWE, and then my dad would be watching Hickson Gracie videos, and I remember I'd be 3 or 4 years old, and he'd be like, oh, get out of my triangle, like that was like the game with dad was like, do jujitsu with him. So it definitely played a huge role in me getting into it, but it was also one of the things that he never forced it upon me. Like it just kind of, he would be at the gym and we would go and I'd see all these boxers, and he was actually one of like the interstate rivals with the gym that where Deontay Wilder was at. So like, that was like, he had a couple boxers fighting him at the Golden Gloves, and so I got to see some really good boxers early on. And then just that atmosphere of that mentality. And then that was, God, when was it? I was about 14. So that was like 2006. So like MMA was just, kind of taking off. And then when I was, 15, 16, I was pretty good at jujitsu. Like I was training it, 3, 4 days a week. And it wasn't really big in Alabama. Like I had a great coach over at Spartan Fitness. And I was able to learn a lot. And then I worked with some up and coming fighters like one of my buddies growing up, Walt Harris. He's a UFC heavyweight champ, or not heavyweight champ, UFC heavyweight fighter. I remember showing him an armbar when I was like 16. So like it was definitely cool to be in that environment and be with those guys. But over time, like I was weightlifting to get bigger, and I wanted to be bigger, and jujitsu wasn't really for big people. And so I was kind of like, well, I just kind of got bored with it. I'd be going to fights, but like, dude, seeing the wear and tear on fighters, man, it kind of, not to say bodybuilding is any better, but it just kind of was like, damn, dude, I remember seeing this guy get leg kicked one time in his fight, and dude, his whole like thigh was bruised, black and purple. So definitely kind of steered me on. And I just remember like I just wanted to be big, and eventually training MMA, like I had a jiu-jitsu gym I would go to twice a week, and I had an MMA gym I would go to 4 times a week, and then I would weight train 5 days a week. I was on a schedule of a pro fighter. I just never fought. Because I was too young, like we didn't have a commission, and I wasn't 18. So by the time 18 came, I was just like, man, I'm kind of burnt out. I want to compete. And it's kind of where it went. But that definitely, I will say that, you mentioned the bullying thing, that definitely helped. I was 17, 18. Nobody really messed with me at school, once they kind of knew. I remember some of the wrestlers, they would want to kind of, see what's up. And I remember one guy came to practice with us, and I was friends with him, but I put it on his ass, man. And he went back to school and kind of told everybody, and nobody really bothered me after that, So
That helps, right, man?
yeah.
Okay, now, uh, what were you, once you were kind of getting towards the end of high school, maybe going into your senior year or whatever? What were your thoughts in terms of what you wanted to do with your life? After high school, talk about what you wanted to be, maybe quote unquote, when you grew up, and then once you actually did graduate, Alexx, like how did life kind of unfold? Did you kind of move in the direction that you wanted to, or did life take you in a different direction?
Man, so it honestly, man, I was probably lost, I'd say, till last year on what I wanted to do in life. But at that age, 18, like I said, I was very poor. I knew I was going to go to community college because that's what my brother did. My brother got a degree in industrial distribution, selling medical equipment. So again, me just following my brother's footsteps is like, well, okay, I'll do that. But where I messed up was my brother's very math oriented, and I took math 100 in college 3 times. Like I'm not a math guy.
Me neither, man. It's okay.
Dude, yeah. So I started running into those issues in college and was like, I don't know. And I got a good job working for one of he ended up being one of my best friends for a while, managing a nutrition store. And I for me, my dream job was to be a strength and conditioning coach for the Baltimore Ravens. I settled for a personal trainer at Gold's Gym. And then from there, it was just like, hey, come run this nutrition store. And, you know, college, I hated school, man. It just at the time was not for me. And it just got to the point I just wanted to bodybuild, just get huge. I remember I was like, all right, I'm 19. I'm gonna take my first cycle. That's it. I'm going to the it was I did exactly what I wanted to do at that time, which was just to eat, be big, and try to be a bodybuilder. And so I would do jobs that allowed me to do that. Like I said, the nutrition stores. I ended up managing 3 of them at once. So I was like the regional manager, did pretty good there. But yeah, it was, and my boss knew. He's like, man, like as long as you can afford to eat and like go to the gym, you're fine. I was like, yeah, dude, I don't care. Like, and that was cool to about 25. I'm turned 30 actually tomorrow, and that was all fun and games to about 25. Then you start like, okay, well, I kind of need to do something with my life here.
Okay, now let's talk a little bit. I don't want to completely leave the career stuff behind, but I just want to kind of interlace the career with the bodybuilding because of obviously what you do now, and what we're going to get into more in depth down the road here in a minute. But now, what do you think, Alexx, outside of just like wanting to get big and all of that, right? And get girls. I think most of us guys in the beginning, like we want to get big, we want to get girls. It's kind of all the superficial stuff, right? Like that's you're almost 30, so you probably had magazines. I'm 35. We grew up with magazines, and you see the muscular guys and the cars and the girls, and it pulls a lot of us in. Okay, let's just be real. That's kind of the
Yeah.
superficial side of it. Outside of that, once you kind of started moving in the direction of actually, living the bodybuilding lifestyle, started taking gear, like what was it, if there was anything past the superficial that kind of like continued to pull you into bodybuilding or kind of kept you in that straight and narrow of living the bodybuilding life?
Yeah, so man, a lot of bodybuilders talk about this now more, but like anxiety and depression is a big role. And like the gym just really like say it saved me mentally through a lot. Like I kind of discussed, like, the rough upbringings with my dad, stepdad, family, home life stuff. Like the gym was kind of always there. And so, and then too, I'm very, very OCD and regimented, kind of in a sense, like because I knew how I'd lost weight. I was very oriented. I knew how I'd put on muscle. I was very goal oriented. Like I was that kid, man. Like, early bodybuilding. I want to eat cake on my birthday. I want to, I trained legs, senior prom. I didn't go to my girlfriend in college's Christmas Eve because I had to train. Like, dude, I was just like, I was that guy. And so I think really just this routine and regiment of it kind of kept me coming back for it. And truly, man, like I remember, I would meet even, I would meet girls and they'd oh, that's just like your veins. That's kind of gross. It's kind of weird. And like, I didn't care. I was just like, hey, whatever. Like, I want to be huge, and that was the trend then. Like now the trend is like looking like Bumstead and like stringers. Back then, man, I mean, that was what 2012, 2013. It was how big can you be? And like that's what kept me going. And then like I said, just mentally the training, I love to train. I don't compete anymore, but I still train, 5 days a week. On my worst days, I eat 4 meals a day. Like I will probably always be this way. So I think mentally it was why I kept going back.
Cool. Okay, so taking a step back into kind of the career thing. So you said at like 25, you're like, all right, something's gotta give here. You can't just, keep going in the direction you're going. So talk a little bit about after that point, like what did you kind of try to do or pursue? And then walk us through how you kind of got into the more of the personal training and then owning your own business and prep coaching and things like that.
Yeah, man. So that was so I was, 25. I was leaving this nutrition store. I went to try to manage a gym, because they were going to let me bring some clients there. I had like three at the time. Um, the gym was terrible. Like they were so bankrupt, and they ended up closing a couple months after I'd gotten there. But we had another local coach in Birmingham who, we were friends. He would shop with me at the store. I said, "Hey, man, like, look, do you mind if I just train some people here?" He was all about it. And so he was actually who he had a team of girls that he coached mostly, and I was like, "Hey, man, like, instead of paying rent, can I just help you out with some of the girls? Like, I'll just run you through some stuff." And he was all about it. He was very supportive. I was like, "Yeah, man, sure, have at it." And so that kind of got me into like seeing what coaches do. Outside of, I had my own coach, but outside of that, and like working with some athletes, and then obviously personal training doesn't pay the bills, so I worked a security job. And that was something that, again, wanting to be a bodybuilder, I was like, well, okay, I can train and eat during the day. I'll go work here 3 nights. The schedule's from 8 to 2 a.m. So as long as, yeah, I would just keep eating through the night, and that allowed me to train and do what I want. And the money was pretty decent, that on top of training. And I'd be like, well, this is doing okay. But it was something like I was, I remember like I had a little car payment. It was like $200 a month, and that was tough. Like I didn't know every month that if I would make it, So I'd be like, well, here we go. But as long as I could afford my food and afford my little gear, I was cool with it, man. And so he, like I said, he got me into allowing me to work with some athletes, and really just the training side of it. And I would just put them through workouts. And I noticed I was pretty good at it, and because everything I had done, I started bodybuilding at 20, so I was 25. I'd been competing for 5 years by then, so I knew what I was doing kind of for myself. And then that same year, I had met another guy named Will Wise. Will Wise is one of my best friends. He's a promoter here in Alabama for a show. But he had like 70, 80 clients at the times. He had just like had 3 state show winners that year. He was like the big dog in the state. And I remember calling him because he had just prepped me. I won my little novice class at the Kentucky Derby. I got second in the Open. It was the first time doing the Open, and I looked really good. He's the first guy to bring me in shredded, and I was like, man, like I think I can help. And so all I did, it was 2018, and it was that same year. I believe that was the year that Sean Roden won the Olympia. And I remember looking at Sean, it was Sean Roden, Chris Aceto, and Psycho Fitness. And I was like, man, what if I could just be like Psycho Fitness? What if I could just, be the little addition? Because if you notice, there's a lot of coaches who don't like doing the workouts. And thank God Will did not like doing the workouts. Will liked the chemistry and the food. So I was just like, hey man, like, what can I like, can I help in any way? And like, I think I could. And I just, we were on the phone, and I just remember saying, man, I can do this. And I went through how I would program a prep, right? And like in correlation with the fatigue and how the drugs and tapering up and down on the volume. And he was like, he told me later, he's like, man, this kid really knows what he's talking about. So I was 25. I was like the little kid in the group. Everybody else was kind of 28, 30s. And he was like, yeah, sure, buddy. He worked, he's a government contractor. So he did good on his own. He didn't coach for money. So he helped me out in that sense of like, yeah, man, I'll give you $50 for every program you do for me. And to me, I didn't even have a laptop at the time. I did it all on my Google Docs on my iPhone. And so like that was how I started, was just Google Docs. And so me and my best friend at the time, Trey Cosper, he still is one of my best friends. He had introduced me to Will, and he was like, "Man, you can do this. You can do this." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, we'll see." So we started like playing around with it, and I just remember like as soon as after that show happened, like the Kentucky show, everyone kind of in the state was like, "Oh man, that was kind of fun. Looks good." And that's when I came out with it. I was like, "Man, like." I was like, aftermath training, that's what we're going to call it, because me and my buddy Trey, like we were just like he was like my ride or die. And the reason Aftermath came about was, one, Aftermath training program, ATP, is adenosine triphosphate. It's like our energy source. But the more significant thing was, I'm a huge Eminem Slim Shady guy. And so you think Aftermath records. So the way I visioned it was, Will was like, um like Jimmy, who runs Aftermath. And then Trey was like my Dr. Dre. He was the one who found me, he came in. And then I was, the little white boy Slim Shady who came in and just took it over. And that's why Aftermath started. And it was all just in my head of like, man, that's freaking cool. But then I had the science behind it. And so my first like official program was for this guy, Brandon Mims. He won junior nats in 2017, I believe. And then he was going to USA's in 2019. So he was the first guy that I got to do a program for. And I was like, dude, we're just going to call it the Aftermath program, because I want people to see what the aftermath of working with me is like. So there's all these different, puns and stuff coming in with it, but that was the first program. And then from there, man, it just kind of took off.
Hmm. Wow. Dude, I love, I call myself a wordy. I don't even know if that's actual word, but I love words. I love coming up with names. I love like the why behind the name. That's why I love podcasting and bringing people on to share their story, because it's like, how did Alexx get here? How did this IFBB pro over here get there? Like I love
Yeah.
to know the why and get behind the muscle, so to speak, or the curtain. So that's super cool. Now, the question I want to ask you, and then we're going to kind of get into your bodybuilding a little bit, but obviously training is kind of your thing, so we're going to continue in that direction for the time being, Alexx. But so with aftermath training, walk us through kind of like when somebody reaches out to you and they say, "Hey, Alexx, can you create a program for me?" Walk us through, you don't have to get like into the nitty gritty, but just generally speaking, walk us through how you kind of construct a program for an individual that wants you to do so for them, if you don't mind.
Yeah, yeah. So now or back then? Because back then I was taking
Let's start at the beginning and then walk us through kind of the evolution, because I want to see, and other people want to see kind of like how it started and how it is today, because that's how kind of life is. It's always an evolution. So
Yeah, yeah. So back then, man, I would do anything for $50. So, like I said, so Will would have, excuse me, Will would have his clients, and like I said, he had 70 or 80. So he would send me their pictures. We would kind of discuss like a needs analysis, like, hey, all right, they need more of this, they need more of this. He would just run it down, got a knee injury, got this, can train 4 days a week, give me a split, push, pull, whatever. And so I would piece it together, send it over to him, hey man, what do you think? He'd yay or nay it. And just kind of, it would kind of go from there. How I would set that up, would be, again, it would be more so just like, okay, what do they need? Do they need more shoulders? Okay, we're going to do, shoulders twice a week, touching with some chest. Or, do they need more legs? All right, we're going to split that up. Or are they big? Are they really quad dominant and very poor hamstring. We might do more hamstring volume throughout the week. So that was just kind of how it started. It was really, I was just kind of told what to make. And I was just like, yeah, dude, sure. And I just would piece it together. I will say, before we go any further, two very influential people to me. I don't know if you've had Luke Miller on here from No Switch.
I have.
So
Awesome guy.
so Luke was he was from Alabama, and he was one of my training partners when I was 23, 24. And back then, man, he was just this nerdy kid who I understood what he was saying, but he didn't really have the physique to kind of flow with it. And it was just like, but you could tell he knew what he was doing. And that was about 2017. And I remember he did a program for me and we were trained together, and he truly just like unleashed something in me. One, I understood how he did programming, but then also not near to the level of what he does now, but like I understood piecing things together. But then two, just kind of the top set, the back off set, he kind of showed me how to do it. And then another very influential guy was John Meadows. I worked with John briefly for about a year after a show in 2014. I worked with him. Um, John's very special to me, because I reached out to him and he was booked at the time. And I just said, hey, man, like, look, I'm very on a budget. Like, he was wanting me to use someone else. I said, hey, just let me know when you're available. I'll wait. And he reached out. I was like, no, man, let's get this together. He did a couple of my training programs. He, got me back into squatting after a partial quad tear. So I what I kind of became was a good mix of a John Meadows and a Luke Miller. If you were to see some of my programming now, a lot of people would see that the influence of both of them. And so as 2019, 2020 came, I never wanted to diet people. Like, I never really thought I was good. But again, I was assistant coaching with another guy, and I would work with just some of the girls that I wanted to, who could follow a plan, and we were doing really good. Like, we turned a girl pro. I started to see that I knew the nutrition side of it, and it's at least with females. So 2019, I started coaching my own. 2020, I had a good little team. And then that was when I kind of broke away from everybody. It was 2020. I didn't work with anyone else. I just had my own name and it was just me. And I wanted to do it all. Not for any other reasons other than like, I didn't agree with a little bit of this, didn't agree with a little bit of that. But I had experienced, like, with me and Will, he would go into shows and have 6, 7, 8 bodies at a time, and I would be right there with him. And he'd be like, we'd go in, we'd look at during the whole peak week, we'd look at him, we'd walk out of the room, he'd be like, what do you think? I would tell him exactly what I thought, like, no scientific wording, no knowledge of what to do. And he was like, okay, you're right. How do you think you'd fix it? And I would tell him. He'd be like, well, okay, but you got to remember this, this, and this. So he was like big brothering, teaching me into to do it. And man, I would say between 2018 and 2020, I probably looked at 200 peaks, like between the two coaches. And it was cool. So that was when I finally saw, like, okay, yeah, I know what I'm doing. In 2019, my best friend Trey, he did the Flex Lewis, and he actually let me make the calls for that. And he was peaked and dialed in, the best he ever was. It was funny because I remember, we had a mentor we worked under, and he was in there, and it was like Friday night, and he just didn't look right, and he had been drinking some water and stuff, and they saw it on my face. It was like 9 p.m. They're like, what are you thinking that I'm saying that's not right? And I was like, dude, I think he's good on water, man. Like, he needs to be drier. And I was like, I was like, y'all keep giving him water and he's not. I was like, I know his body. He's gonna like he just holds it. I was like, he's fine. He's not cramping. There's no signs of anything wrong. I said, just quit giving him water. And that's not to say like, hey, don't drink water, but they were just there just wasn't a need for it at that time. And I made that decision. I spoke up. They respected it, and the next day he was just bang on, and I was like, "Thank God," because like, but it was one of those. I just knew, man, I had seen it enough, and so that was kind of the development of, okay, well, Alexx is by himself. Alexx has a few clients, and then it just kind of took off, and so now I will say I almost quit. 2020, like when COVID hit, I only had like 7 clients. I didn't have a lot. There was times in 2021 I was prepping for my last show. I wanted to. People were just driving me nuts. Like they just weren't wanting to do what I want. Like they just weren't doing what I'm asking. And here I am, like, you know, it was one of those things. Like I was killing my prep, and then I have all these other people I'm prepping, and they're just like just being babies, and so that point, the drugs you're on during prep, my tolerance was like a 3. I was just like, man, like y'all better get on somewhere. But now, once I hung up competing, and that's a whole nother story. I had some hard issues in 2020, which we can talk about later. But that was something I knew 2021 was my last show. And so I knew I was giving it everything I got. And as soon as that show was over, man, I nailed it. So I was like 199 pounds. I was a heavyweight by a pound. And I remember I looked really good. I was just small, but I looked really fucking good. And we're going into our state show. And I remember that even the promoters were like, dude, like, do you want to go like pull a pound off real quick? You can come back. And I just looked at him and I was like, this is probably the halo testing talking, but I was just like, nah, man. I was like, if I gotta beat, if I'm taking this state belt, I gotta beat every motherfucker in here. And that was, sorry my language, but that was my mentality. And so I walked in the heavyweight class 1 pound over as a heavyweight. And it was a good class. It was weird because I was the smallest on stage, like the smallest. And then so I looked down at the light heavyweight class. I knew I would have won that. But then the heavyweight class, Alabama was on this thing of like, who could do the best at nationals? That's who the overall winners are going to go to, and blah, blah, blah. But I really messed up the lineup because I was so shredded and so conditioned. I made everyone else look bad. And that, and so it was annoying that I was on stage because they're like, well, he's not going to win, but he's making everyone else look bad. And that it was truly how I felt. And so honestly, I think I ended up getting fourth. Just, and literally the judges were like, yeah, you were just too small. And they're like, you would have won the light heavies. I was like, well, yeah, but I wanted the whole thing. But it was cool because at that show, man, I had peers who were better bodybuilders. Like, I don't know if you know Trey Adcock. He just did so he's a great friend of mine.
Yeah.
And even he was like, dude, like that was good. Cameron Cheek was like, man, beautiful shape. I was like, and so that prep to me kind of solidified me as like, okay, well, Alexx knows what he's doing at least. Like I knew I wasn't going to be a pro. I knew I wasn't probably even going to win the show, but I just wanted to exemplify that, hey, I know what I'm doing with this. And I think that won the respect of even better bodybuilders to trust me. And so that was probably the biggest win, with all that. And then from there, it just kind of, the coaching took off, and it went into something that I started doing these seminars and workshops around the state, and traveling and being very vocal. I started doing stuff on social media and just kind of being the guy. And my whole role with that was I just wanted to say what was real, right? Like I don't sugarcoat it. Like I'm sure if you scroll far enough, you can find some of my rants about people going to nationals that don't belong. And people are like, oh, he just talks shit or he's arrogant. And I'm like, yes, but I say this to my athletes. So like, a lot of people think it's a call out, but I'm like, no, man, like I'm just saying what's real. And so even if, like I said, I'm friends with some of the bigger names, I'm actually, Cameron Cheek, Luke Miller, very successful coaches. And so when I speak, I don't have the education level that Luke does, right? But when I say something, I at least know that he can agree with it or at least see my point. And and that's all I wanted. Like I didn't want every coach to be like, oh yeah, Alexx is this right. But I at least wanted everyone to be like, well, okay, he's got a point. It might not be what I like, but he's got a point. And once I started speaking like that, it really just kind of made my own thing because I'm not I'm in school, but I don't have my master's degree yet. I don't, um, so I just speak. That's why some of I use some foul language, but that's just kind of one of that's why people relate to me because I'm very just like, hey, dude, like this is what it is, and I know for a fact. I tell my guys this all the time. I'm like, dude, I tried to be a pro. Like I gave it everything I got. So I think speaking from that helps with some athletes and working with me.
Mm. So, what's kind of the future for aftermath training then, Alexx? Like, what is your ultimate goal if you kind of have one business wise? What are you trying to work towards in terms of being a coach and kind of the future?
Man, I'm in school. I'm at UAB. It's University of Alabama at Birmingham. They have this program. It's called Behavioral Wellness and Nutrition. So I met with my advisor. I've got like 3 semesters left. But basically, when I graduate, I can take my exam to be registered dietitian. And then they have master's programs with nutritional psychology, working with eating disorders. They have an excellent diabetes research lab down at UAB. So, me personally, I want to keep diving in more into that realm and more the medical side of things. But as far as like my coaching business, now I'm to a point where I only want serious athletes. And luckily, my athlete count is close to it's over 50. I think it's close to 60, but everyone checks in. I once I became exclusive and started telling people no or dropping people. Like, so one thing that gets people is, when we have our consultation, I'm like, look, I'm month to month. And yeah, that's a benefit to you, but it's a benefit to me because if you don't work with how I want to work, I'll drop you. Like, I don't want someone stuck with me for 6 months because that honestly, that's how I get some athletes. It's like, well, I got 2 more months of my contract. And I'm like, but they're already 1 foot out the door. And so I'm just like, man, I don't want to do that. And it's probably a poor business decision. Uh, but for me, man, I want to work with people who want it. And like I said, I've dropped athletes, I've sent athletes to other coaches who I just knew we just didn't click. But so that's kind of where I'm at now. I'm pretty tight with our state NBC chairman. I'm pretty tight with the Tennessee NBC chairman. And so we actually like I said, we do workshops and seminars. I do them for free. I try to bring in other coaches. So I'm trying to do more of those. And we did one in Tennessee 2 weeks ago. So those are fun to me. And those are something I want to do more of, just really trying to help educate some of the up and coming athletes and not so much I'm not a doctor. Like I said, I don't have a master's degree yet, so I'm not like the J3 university education. I'm not going to be that guy. But if I can get some people coming in like I had a girl on 100 milligrams of test sip, and I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Or, they're eating T3. Or I've had 3 clients come to me coming from another coach who just come off letrozole cold turkey. And they're bikini girls taking letrozole. And I'm like, this is just crazy. So for me, it's something that I want, like, I'll literally open the floor, hey, you'll raise a question. And I'll usually say something really kind of deep, like, hey, look, y'all want to talk about trend? Let's talk about it. we don't ever talk about it, but it opens that door up where our girl can be like, hey, well, I was doing this, and they're more comfortable. So I try to just be an open book for people who have just been geared the wrong way, and with anything with training, like my last topic was all about training principles, like, hey, top set, back off set, put your phone on do not disturb, just little things that everyone can grasp. So I would definitely like to do more of those. I would love to be a judge. I've done some of the test judging already. The thing is like, well, I have athletes, so it's like, well, you can't really be a judge. But I love the sport, man, and I always want it to be something I do for fun. I don't want it to be what I rely on financially. Like I said, because um I want to work with the best. And I don't know if you've noticed the trend, but like there's not a ton of new competitors. There's a ton of new young fitness people, but there's not a lot of upcoming competitors. And so, I worry about that. I'm like, well, I don't know if people are going to compete, but it's a whole another thing. But yes, I think for me, man, I just John, and I look at John Meadows for this because he left such an impact on everybody, people who didn't even meet him. And you know, I want to, if I could at least be that in like the Southeast, like Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, like, okay, yeah, he did it. He taught me this, he taught me that. Like, I would love to just leave that mark, and I don't have a pro card, scoreboard. But honestly, man, like there's part of an ego thing with it too. Like, I want to be the baddest dude around. Like, I want to be the best coach. And I'm starting to gain more of that, especially with Walter, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But yeah, man, I love the sport. And like I said, it was something that got not taken from me. I just did a lot of dumb stuff, and it was something that I want to. It allows me to keep living that dream, just with athletes, and so that's, yeah. If I can take it and run with it, I'll coach people forever. It'll probably just get more selective, But like Hani, you see Hani with the three, this weekend. But
Unbelievable.
but yeah, but for now, man, it's going great. I just want to keep building. I just want to take over Alabama, which I've already have, and then I want to get into Tennessee, and that's kind of my goal.
Cool. Okay, so let's since you brought up Mr. Walter Debbs, why don't you talk to us about how you got connected with him and walk us through just how you've kind of helped him get to where he's at now as a newly crowned IFBB pro. And by the way, Walter is a really cool dude. I've had the opportunity to connect with him a couple times on the podcast, and he's just, they don't come much more chill than him, man. So how did you connect with him, and how have you been helping him kind of get to where he's at now?
Man, so Walter, like you said, and there's nobody more chill than him. It's funny, he calls me his vanilla brother. So one of our first bonding moments was in the gym. Like, we knew of each other. So like Walter was the guy at every show. He'd come into these state shows, and we'd always be like, man, if he could bring it, if he could nail it, if he could come in shape, Walter's gonna be his freak. But then it kind of got to the point where like his coach for the longest time was just, I really don't even want to give him attention, but he sucked. And it was just one of those, man. He would just, we would see it and we're like, man, he, he's just not like, he's just not finishing the job. And like, you have all this potential, and then so you almost wonder, like, well, is it Walter? Like, what's he doing? So when we first met, it was when we first met to coach, it was 2021. It was January 2021. And I met him, and he was like 270, fat, eating like twice a day. Like, he had just done like 6 months of Clomid, you know, because he was getting his wife pregnant, and which they have a beautiful baby girl. But he looked terrible, and I was just like, oh my god, like, but even at his worst, he still looked good. I was like, I'm like, this doesn't make sense. But you know, so coming off his past coaching, he had some kidney health, just poor kidney health, like nothing crazy damaging. And then so we're dealing with low metabolism, we're dealing with, you know, hormones all over the place. So really 2021 was just trying to get him into shape. And you know, we would train together because now he lives in Tennessee, but he lived here then. And we would meet up like once or twice a week, and he'd come in, and he'd be like 15, 20 minutes late, and he'd be like, "What's up, man?" And he'd be like, "Oh, I gotta mix my pre-workout." And I'm like, "All right, dude," which me, I'm very OCD. I'm very 501, bro. We're training. So it took a minute to kind of get to know him, but I think one of our first bonding moments was, so he would train with me and my buddy Trey, and he pulled out a can of dip, and he just like kind of, because water doesn't say much, but he kind of like showed it to us and smirked, and it was one of those like, see, I can hang with the white folks, you know, and you know, so we were, you know, the white guys, you know, we got Jordans on and stuff, so I just kind of pointed at my shoes and was like, yeah, man. I was like, we I got you. And then we were training hamstrings. And so Walter doesn't like to train heavy. And so we were doing stiff leg deadlifts, and we started getting to like the dumbbells, like the 130s, 140s. He's like, man, y'all white boys crazy. And but then he goes and does like 19 reps. And I'm like, what the like, dude, you've been hanging down here with the 60s, and you just blew right through us. But it was those moments that, you know, we bonded, and we didn't even really talk much, but he knew when he was coming to train with us that we'd get on him, and we would take him to that level. And he needed that. You know, there was one workout where he got kind of frustrated because we weren't like getting on him. He's like, come on, man, like y'all bring it. And so then I was like, oh, okay, he likes it, you know. So um, we were getting him ready for this show. It was my first time working with him, getting ready for this local Birmingham show, 2021. And I begged him, I was like, dude, please don't do this show. Like, he was still like 240, like just not, but we were 9 weeks out from USA's, but it just wasn't. I wanted him to go to a show closer to USA's because I'm like, look, man, like it's our first time together. People are going to be talking shit. Like people are like, we're building you up. Like let's wait. And he was like, no, nah, man, I'm gonna do it. So I was like, all right. So you know, we get there, and like he's looking like, for somehow he comes to life. I mean, he looks pretty good, but you know, in my head, he's still 9 weeks out. And I was like, all right, man. So we get there, we get the weigh-ins, and I'm like, all right, man, like, you know, what all you had to eat today? He's like, oh, I've had like maybe 2 meals. And dude, it's like 6 p.m. And I'm like, well, okay. I was like, well, you got any food with you? And he was like, no. I was like, okay. And so, dude, you know, so like, you know me, man, I'm Mr. OCD. And so I had a classic physique competitor. I said, hey, you got any food with you? He's like, yeah. I said, I need your food. And he was like, what? I was like, I need your meal right now. I don't care what it is. So he starts eating, feeling good. And he's like, yeah, I can be a little tighter. And I don't say anything. I'm just like, yeah, all right, man. Like we're okay. You know, let's eat, let's eat. So he gets on stage, does a show, and it's like, you know, people are dogging him, like, oh, there's one comment, you know, his old coach was like, oh, he looks 6 weeks out. And I was like, well, actually, he's 9, idiot, but you know, whatever. But it was exactly what I thought, right? It just it was the same old Walter, like not in shape. And even our chairman, like I said, I'm friends, was like, he's like, hey, y'all going somewhere, you need to bring those legs down. And I'm like, well, thanks, dude. Like, we're still 9 weeks out. Like, y'all give me a break. He won. I mean, he won the whole show, man. He just he blows everybody out of the water. And so we were going to USA's. Um, USA's was big because he was on it. And you know, when he went out there, I learned so much about him from that first little prep, and then I learned so much about him at USA's. USA's is a 2 day show. Um, so I was playing more conservative, like not many diuretics. Like, all right, we'll be good. We gotta come back. I learned that he can hold a lot of water. I learned that he does not really flatten out much. So prejudging comes and we're like in third USA's. I'm like, man, this is great. So we do it, end up getting third. Like they say, oh, you just be a little tighter. But to me, like, so how prestigious USA's and nationals would be to me as an upcoming bodybuilder. So I'm like, dude, third, that's crazy. And he's like, yeah, like, I mean, he wants the card. And I'm like, all right, bro. Well, last time you did North Americans, you got like eighth or seventh. It's like, we're doing good. Like, this is just what it is. And so he's all right, like let's go to nationals, let's do this. I'm like, all right, man, cool. All right, we'll go to nationals. So start going to nationals, and we obviously we had some time, so we had August to December. And so the thing with Walt, he doesn't like to eat. He's not a big eater. Um, and so and I think that's why I work well with him, because I feel like a lot of and I don't do this with everybody, but Walter's an exception. But it's one of those things. I'm like, hey man, like every time we would check in, what are you eating? Just because I wanted to know. And it was always around what I was having him do, but like he may do a protein shake instead of a chicken breast or something like that. And so I'm like, okay, but so I look at him and I see what he's doing and I would adjust it. And then we would kind of go into it. But for that nationals, I remember I tried to give him some high days, and nothing crazy, like 250, 300 grams of rice in a meal, 100 grams of oats, but nothing outrageous. He just wasn't eating it. He was just like, and so it was one of those, like, the 2 days went by. I was like, all right, man, you're like, what'd you eat? And he's like, oh, like a cup of rice, cup of this. And I was like, okay, so, but, at that time, man, like as a coach, okay, well, if he really doesn't have an appetite, then okay, like I'm not gonna force the food down him. He's just gonna make him uncomfortable. So I was like, okay, I was like, let's do this, man. I was like, you and your wife, I was like, y'all like go out to dinner? He's like, yeah, yeah. I was like, all right, we all go out to dinner. I was like, just eat. I said, just eat. Let me know what you eat. I said, I want you to get dinner, appetizer, dessert. I said, send me pictures the next day. And he wakes up next morning. He's like, Coach, I look crazy, man. Like, what is all this? And I was like, I was like, okay. I was like, what'd you eat? And so he gets this meal. It's like steak and potatoes and this pink lemonade drink and some dessert. And like, it's his meal. And I'm like, okay, dude. I said, you were going to do that every time I tell you to have a hot day. So we would get, we'd do a cup of rice and this, but that, I'm like, go eat that meal. Send me pictures. And he just started cooking. He'd be like, Coach, like, why's my weight going down? I was like, dude, it's just working. I was like, let's ride this out. And that once he saw that was when he really like was believing in me. The USA's peak was great, but then once he started seeing, when you tell Walter you got to prep, he's 2 hours of cardio, no carbs. That's what he thinks. And so when he got to see that we could still eat, it was very new to him. And so he just had to see it work. And once he did, that was his meal. So we got the nationals, and nationals is a whole other. It's I don't want to throw him under the bus, but so Walter drives down to nationals, and so he just has a new baby. Dude, it's like a 12-hour drive, when you have a kid, and so he gets there Thursday, drove all night, and he gets there Thursday. I'm like, all right, man, let's get to the gym. And he's just a water buffalo. Like he is holding so much water. And I'm like, oh shit. Like, he's had like, and so I'm like, hey man, like, well, we got to eat. And he's like, oh, I need to go get some food. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I'm trying not to stress, but I'm like, me, I'm like, I got my meals packed. I'm like, all right, man. So let's go eat some chicken. Let's go eat this. We start posing. And we had met Jose Raymond once before. And so we're posing, and Jose Raymond comes in the room wanting to, look at him. And everyone's going nuts. Everyone's like, is he super? Is he this? And in my head, I'm like, dude, like he's holding so much water. Like, this is not like we're not ready yet, but he starts coming alive during that posing session. And dude, I swear he probably sweat out 3 or 4 pounds just posing. Just Jose worked him. And he just starts coming to life. I'm like, oh, thank God. And all that water from the drive. But this is all leading into I'm collecting data on his body. I'm like, I'm seeing it, I understand it. So that night, Thursday night, I'm like, all right, dude, we've had 2 meals. Let's, hey man, let's go get that meal you like. Go find it. I think it was like a Logan's or something. I was like, go get it. And the next morning, this is Friday, so we're one day out. And he's like, hey man, I threw up. I threw up all that food. And I'm like, oh shit. So, like here we are, like we're still flat, I can't really do much diuretics because we're dehydrated, we're losing, it's a lot. And so I'm like, all right, man. I said, go to the hotel breakfast. I said, just take a picture of what you eat. Cause like at this point, we just gotta fill out. And so we start feeding. And it was Friday night at like 11 p.m. I look at him outside his hotel and I'm like, God, I'm like, dude, we did it. Like, we are on. And the next morning, he comes on stage, and dude, you see Walter on stage, man, he just looks like a trophy. And the thing with like, I don't know if you saw that show, but he got in the first call out, but he was on the end. Justin Shire was the man coming in that show. Still is the man. He looked amazing. But Justin holds the middle, and Justin's in the middle of the time. Jansen's on a roll, Vu's on a roll. They got their squad there, and they start posing. And so Walter starts coming to life. And so they move him in, from the outside, they move him one in, they pose around again, and Walter's getting better. And like I said, Shire looked amazing, but Shire's like kind of fading. Like he's just fatiguing. Like you can see, and Walt's just getting better. I mean, he's hitting the hair flip, and he's being himself. And dude, so they end up moving Walt all the way to the split middle with Shire. And I'm like, I'm freaking out. Luke Miller's there, he's freaking out, like, because no one expected him to that was Shire's show. And I was like, oh my God, we're gonna do it. And so they pose one more time. Steve takes the longest pause of my entire life. Like, dude, it had to have been, it felt like 10 minutes, it was probably 20 seconds. He's like, all right, see y'all tonight. And dude, the place goes nuts because like Walt just like upset everybody. I was like, man, like I'm like hugging his wife, like, we did it, like we got that second place pro. And Walt comes out, and I meet him backstage. He's like, man, he's like, I think we're about to get judged again. And I was like, what are you talking about? I was like, the supers are on, like y'all are done. He's like, no, man, like there's these guys back here in suits, man. They're sitting there talking, like saying we're going to judge again. And I was like, whatever, dude. I was like, we just nailed that. Let's go. So I'm like, my confidence is up. And so, he comes out for finals, and, they call him third. And I'm just like, oh, dude, like as a coach, man, I was so devastated. I remember like, they just had the baby. They were wanting to take some time. I just remember hugging his wife, like, we did it. We did it. And that broke me, man. I was just like, it sucked. And then from a competitive aspect, Luke had a classic guy go pro. Cam had a classic guy go pro. And I'm like, shit, man. Like, as a coach, I'm like, I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. So we get done, and he moves to Tennessee. And then this next year, we met up in May. He came down for a show, hanging out. We trained. He's looking good, but he's only like 240. Like he got real sick with COVID. He was like 211, 212 pounds, like light. He wasn't really training super hard. So in May, like we just kind of had a talk. I was like, yeah, man, like, look, we're coming off a third and third. Like, we're only as good as our last show. Like let's grow. We need to get bigger. We still got some room. He's like, all right, yeah, I'm good with it. And then I think it was about September. We were 14 weeks out, and he hits me up and said, "Hey, coach, like, let's get that T3, let's go." And I was like, "All right, man." So I'm like, okay, because like, hey, he's one of those, man. Like, we're good enough friends where like I could shoot it to him straight, but it's Walter. Like he's got it, he's got it. So we start prepping, and dude, he's losing weight. Like he went from like 243 to 229, like fast. And we met up um in October, and I'm like, dude, you gotta eat more. And he's finally hungry. It's the first prep he's ever been hungry. And so I'm like, okay, man. I'm like, dude, we're gonna kind of be kind of small. Like, let's eat. And so we start feeding him more. And this prep went really good. But I wasn't there with him to train. So like, come to find out, he's doing 3 4 hour sessions like on his own, like just, and I'm like, oh man. So finally I start kind of getting wind of like how he's training and stuff. And because like he'll be doing cardio for like an hour, and then he'll call me. He'll call me like doing cardio, and we'll talk, shoot the shit. And he's like, hey man. But that was something his weight when he would check in would be all over the place. It'd be like 219, 224, 230. And I'm like, dude, like what is going on? So, we make this last push into nationals, and it was Thanksgiving. So it's like 2 weeks, 10 days, something like that. And he was 229. And I'm like, dude, we were just 222 like a week ago. Like, what's going on? And um, so finally I was like, don't do any cardio. Like for love, I was like, just please, man, like don't do any cardio. Because he says he gets in his head, and he really thinks that he's not good enough. And I'm like, dude, like chill. I'm like, we have to make weight, like just stop. And so he finally, he dropped like 2 or 3 pounds, and then we didn't do any cardio again. He dropped 2 or 3 pounds. Um, so he comes and sees me Tuesday before we're leaving, and he's 227. I'm like, okay, like we'll be fine. We'll make weight. Um, but his pictures don't do him justice. So like I was nervous, man. Like I was like going into that, I was like, dude, I don't know. Like, because to me, again, third place, like that's really good. And I'm like, dude, we only got so many chances, right? But I saw him in person. I was like, holy, you look good. And so knowing that, like once I saw him, I was like, okay. And I remember texting Trey Adcock, and I was like, dude, it's on, and I actually saw I didn't go to nationals. I couldn't because I had final. And so I was like, well, okay, just know his pictures look terrible, going into it. So, he does he drives Wednesday night, gets there Thursday morning, man. He tells me he's 226 when he gets there. And so he's got to weigh in. And so I'm like, he's probably 228. He's probably just like not, he's probably just being nice, right? So, me being with fighters and stuff, I'm like, man, go make your own little sauna, get a hot bath going. We just got to sweat it out. And so he did, he ended up, on the scale like 222. Um, so we started eating. And like I said, it's very with Walter, it's very, the guy interviewing him after he won was like, "Oh, you full as a house, man. What your carb up was like?" And I'm like laughing. Like the most we did, he likes cream of wheat. And so again, it's one of those things I'm like, I sent him a food list. I was like, just get what you like off this list. Let me know what you got. And so, I think the most we did was like it was like 80 grams of cream of wheat, and then like a banana, and then he would do some like a sweet potato, and he would do like a Pop Tart, like nothing crazy, and just slowly eating. And so we start doing the thing the same Friday, and I push his water, so I push his water hard. And the benefit with Walter is he's even flat. Like when I saw him Tuesday, he was no carbs, no nothing, and still full to the eye. I knew he was flat, but so there's nothing I could do to make him look flat. Like I would really have to mess up to make him flat. So that's relieving. So we dry them out. We use, I think we used half a diazide Friday morning, a half of one midday, and then half of one that night. That's pretty aggressive for me. That's pretty aggressive. But with Walter, he's just so water sensitive. Like he just has to get it off. And so that night, it was like I was at work, so I was working a security job, and it's like 2 a.m. Orlando time. I think he's asleep, and so he sends me a text, and he's like, 217, coach, let's get it. And I'm like, okay, well, like it's the most confident he'd ever been this whole prep. But then in my head, I'm like, dude, we gotta be up in 4 hours. Like, get some sleep. But I'm just like, all right, man, let's do it. And then that morning, I call him, hey man, you feeling good, looking good? Oh yeah, he's ready. He's rocking. He's dry, he's hard. And so I'm like laying in bed, watching the live. And so he goes out for his individual and he walks off stage. As soon as he walked off stage, like 20 seconds later, my phone rings. It's Walter Debbs. And I'm like, dude, and so like mind you, they have not done comparisons, they've not done anything. So I think something's wrong. I'm like, oh, like something happened, he's fainted, it's like it's something. So I answer, I'm like, well, hello. He's like, hey coach, what you think? And I was like, dude, I'm like trying not to laugh. I was like, what do I think? I was like, man, yeah, dude, you look great. He's like, I do. And I was like, yes, man. I was like, you look amazing. I'm like, Walter, I was like, they're about to pose y'all so hard. I said, please go drink some water, get some chips because we use it for the salt. And I was like, go get ready. And he's like, all right. He's like, I'll talk to you later. And so, but just the fact, man, that I'm like, only you would call and see, hey, how do I look? Um, and dude, when I saw him out there, man, he was so on, and you don't really notice it till he's in the lineup. And he was just so full and so round, and just like I said, he just stood out. And I think it aided him a little bit, because they called him off and they're like, all right, top four, we're gonna pose you again. So I'm freaking out, like, oh god, it's just like last year, they're gonna call us third or something. Um, but as a fan, and then also understanding how the sport goes, I felt like this year, like when he moved to the middle, like almost off the quarter turns, it was very okay. It's his show to lose. Like it was, they were going to make somebody take it from him. And even the picture, like some of the pictures of the live stream, like you just watch it, you're like, man, he's just a whole nother level of thickness. Um, but even after prejudging, he calls me and I'm like, I'm going nuts. I'm like, dude, we did 5 rounds and you didn't move once. Um, and he's like, so I'm like, hey man, all right, look, we're gonna go eat that meal again, your usual steak meal. Because trying to get him to eat all day, but it wouldn't have worked. So I was like, look, go get your meal. He got a Gatorade, and that was it. Like that, I knew I had one shot to feed him. I was like, that's it, we're good. And so, but after that, he's texted me and he's like, you think I'm gonna be in the overall? And I'm like, yes, Walter. I'm like, yes, man, you're gonna. I'm like, Walter, you have to be ready for this overall. Like, please, like, just trust me. Like, we're there. And so, he went and when they called him, he told me after, he's like, man, I just kept thinking they were gonna call me third again. Like it was almost like PTSD for him. But they called him, and then for me as a coach, I'm like, I'm watching, Instagram and all that, like, oh, like this dude looks good. And they got Jansen's guys the super, and I'm on my head. And so just as a coach to be able to, like I said, I look at it as a competition. So I'm like, hell yeah, we just beat Jansen's guy, we just beat Vu's guy. I'm like, let's go, baby. I'm hyped up. And but it was wild, man. Like people don't realize how big he is. But like, I mean, he looked like the super in the lineup. Like it's so crazy. And like I said, we didn't carve him up. I mean, it's maybe 300 grams of carbs, like 350. But it's just, like I said, I think for us, bodybuilders, we stress everything and we have to fight that cortisol. And for him, he's just so laid back and just so, and that's why I don't think a lot of people could coach. Like, I don't think he would do well with a coach who's very like, stat sheets and this, that, and the other. I think, once I took the time to see what he wanted, because he's smart, like he understands a lot of it. And so once I just was like, what do you like, what do you feel? And it's always, anytime we would talk, how you feeling, what do you see it, I know what I see, but I want him to feel it too. So that was kind of the Walter Dev story. Is very more than, there's no one like him, like you said, man. And I think it does a huge favor for his look too.
That's that's the side of the story that we didn't necessarily get from Walter. So that's
Yeah.
awesome, man. But having a couple conversations with him, Alexx, it all makes sense, and I could see it right now. That's why I was laughing and smiling, because like I could definitely see Walter being that guy. But it's kind of a breath of fresh air, because and I'm the same way. I'm a lot like you. Got kind of the OCD, and everything's got to be on point and everything, which is fine. But it's cool to have somebody that's kind of like a genetic freak like Walter, that just kind of like, hey, you know what? I love he tells me he doesn't really like competing. He likes the training. So,
Yeah.
doesn't really like to compete. Told me that he didn't really want to get into bodybuilding because he didn't want to wear the thong. Just likes to train. Doesn't really like to eat. He told me the same thing you said. He's doing like 2-3 hours of cardio, or 2-3-4 hour workouts, and but it's just his attitude. It's kind of a breath of fresh air in this OCD, just the over the top bodybuilding world we live in, right?
Yeah. Yeah, man. And like I said, with him, 2021, it was, I got to go pro. I got to go pro. Because I coach one of his best friends, Andrew, who's a classic physique pro. And, Andrew got that card. So it was like, all right, well, like, you're next, dude. So there's a lot of pressure. 2022, he didn't mention it once. Like, he was like, I was actually the first to mention it, and I don't ever mention it. And I was like, look, man, like if we don't get it here, we keep dieting, go to the Arnold Amateur, this, that, and the other. And he's like, hey, man, I'm just bringing what I want to bring. And I'm like, okay, cool. And it worked, because like you said, and he truly meant that. Like when I saw him, like, I feel like we were a little smaller than last year, but it looked better. And so with me, I was like, man, that's exactly what we needed. So yeah, he's my favorite person to coach. And because he's a genetic anomaly, but at the same time, there are parts of his physique that's very difficult. And so, like, a lot of people think like coaching him's easy. And I'm like, no, 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 no. It's actually more hard, because like he's very thick skin. Like, his hamstrings are dug out. And we've talked about, like, dude, you probably not going to get that grainy, glute striations like people have. But if you pinch his skin, you feel it. It's like, well, dude, there's nothing else. I don't know what else we could pull. But yeah, I love coaching him, man. And he is every bit of how he is on your show, and he's just having a good time, man. It makes it fun, man. It really does.
Yeah. Just living life, loving his wife, his beautiful daughter. It's cool. Let's wrap up, Alexx. I said we were going to talk a little bit about your competing. We've been going well over an hour, so I just want to kind of hit on you competing in your last competition. You said in 2021, and just talk a little bit about was it hard for you to kind of walk away from competing? Was it easy? I know you mentioned some health stuff, so just touch on that lightly, and then we'll wrap it up, my man.
Yeah, man. So just to summarize it, like I said, I've competed in like 6 shows. I'd been obviously pushing the gear since I was 20, and I did a lot of I was just way too aggressive for no reason. But I had lost in 2019. It was like the worst look. It was a terrible prep. But 2020 was like my redemption year, man. I was taking ungodly amounts of, stuff. And it was one of those things like, I thought I was taking primo, but it was just more test on top of already high tests. So I mean, I think I was accidentally taking like 2,200 milligrams of testosterone, like all in all. Like, I mean, I'm talking, it was bad. I was waking up, my blood pressure was in the 160s. Like I had very bad health problems. And so I went to the cardiologist because I had a scare one night. My blood pressure was like in the 190s. And I was like trying to go to bed. So I went to the cardiologist, the EKG and all that. I had, enlarged left ventricle. I've got like a false tendon, and like it's basically like a free floating tendon that attaches to my heart. It's nothing serious, but they're like, but with high blood pressure and an enlarged heart, it can cause a murmur and things like that. So my cholesterol was terrible. So I was basically told, hey, don't work out anymore. And I was like, what? And so went back to my MMA coach, went back to just training jujitsu. I was just a whole different person, but 2021, I started getting that itch, man. And I didn't have that like, I don't want to say farewell. I didn't have that look. I never achieved that look. I never nailed it. I had like two good looks, but I was never like spot on. And so I was just like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to give it one more time. I'm not going to die in 5 months. Like, let's do it one more and I'll be done. And, you know, I had to do it. I told my coach about all the health problems and stuff. And, we were very health conscious. Um, but it was one of those, man, I did everything I could do for that show. From the I was posing 12 weeks out. I was, I didn't miss a beat, and I loved it and I knew it was my last one. And I coached actually three athletes in the show as well. And I just, it was the coolest thing. Like, my posing routine, I knew the guy running the music. So he let me go for like an hour, like a minute 45, like way over the time. But it was something, like I said, the look, and then just mentally, like knowing it was my last time to walk across the stage, like I needed it, to just finally be done with it. Like I said, it wasn't anything I was gonna like die that year, but it was just, hey man, you can't keep pushing the limits. And so, now I channel that competitiveness. I compete in jiu-jitsu tournaments and matches, and then I also, like I said, the coaching, like I am very competitive in coaching. Like, I love seeing other good coaches and be like, okay, like, let's go. So that's kind of where that led. But yeah, like I said, that show was everything to me. The pic, I finally have good stage pictures. It was really cool, man. And like I said, the getting the props from my peers who are better than me. I One of my friends that I competed against, he prepped after that and was asking me some questions. I was like, dude, that's really cool. So I couldn't ask for a better way to go out, but there's a part of me that I still like. I still train with some of my athletes, and so like, and it's one of those, like I was telling my media guys, like, dude, I don't know how much longer I can keep do this, because like I'm hurting, but it's one of those, like, well, they know when they train with me, I put it on them, and they complain during a prep. I'm like, hey man, like I'd give anything to be doing what you're doing. So it helps, going full circle.
For sure, man. Awesome, Alexx. Well, I think we definitely got into it, man. Especially with the coaching and stuff, and kind of getting a little behind the scenes story about the adventures of Walter and Alexx and
Yeah.
prep. And I really appreciate it, man. Before I do a quick outro, why don't you give us your Instagram, and then if anybody wants to connect with you in terms of coaching or anything like that, is Instagram the best way, or is there a website? And then if you have any final thoughts, any final words, any shout outs, I'm turning it over to you, and then I'll do a quick outro and I'll let you go. So platform's yours, my man.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. No, so my Instagram handle is aftermath_training. There's a red and black logo as the icon. That you can DM me there, or email is just aftermathtraining18@gmail.com. Yeah, I'm very responsive with that. Really, like, shout out, all my athletes, like you guys are awesome. Walter was my 10th overall win this season, so that was cool. I had tallied up. Okay, I got 9 for the year, so Walter was nice to hit that double digits. But yeah, just really, shout out to everybody in the industry, man. Like I discussed earlier, Luke Miller and John Jewett are doing big things with J3U. All the up and coming coaches who are big, the Cameron Cheeks, the Matt Jansons, the Andrew Vu's, they're very, like I said, it's a cool competition, like I see all those guys and I want to chase them, so, I hope that they keep bringing athletes on, and John Meadows, another one. I know he's not here, but definitely thank him for everything he did for the sport. And my 2 best friends, Trey Cosper and Will Wise, they're why I got that start, and we'll keep that Slim Shady vibe all the way into next year.
Awesome. And all of you coaches are in pursuit of the GOAT, which is officially Hani Rambod. He's been the GOAT, I think, for quite a while, but just once again, I think he reminded everybody at this Olympia, right?
Man, yeah, and if nobody, it was funny, man. I made that story about the FST7, and I have people asking, "What is that?" And I'm like, "Oh God!" But yeah, Hani's the man. Like, there is no, it's cool. It's like you have that old school fighter come back and just let everybody know what's up, But yeah, dude, because like I think everybody looks up to Hani, so he'll
All right,
probably.
Alex. I really appreciate you coming on, man. Sharing a little bit of your life story, sharing your coaching and bodybuilding story with us, man. I greatly appreciate it, and we'll catch up in the future. Okay.
All right, my man. We'll talk soon.
Cool. All of you who are tuning in to another episode of Behind the Muscle podcast, I just want to say thank you so very much. If you guys have not done so already, please make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube in terms of Behind the Muscle podcast. Also, take this episode with Alex, share it on your Instagram stories. Make sure you tag Alex, tag Behind the Muscle, so that we know that you listened specifically to this episode and found great value in it, in which I know you did. And then finally, I will leave you all with this. Remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.